The dim glow of the operations tent bathed the room in a cold, sterile light. A battered folding table sat at the center, covered in satellite images, wind charts, and hastily printed maps of the city grid. Outside, the desert wind howled, rattling the thin metal walls. Inside, 6 men stood in silence, all staring at the same image. A grainy, zoomed-in photograph of a man stepping from a black SUV. "This is the target," the mission commander said flatly, his voice cutting through the quiet. "High value, top of the kill list. Location, Sector 19. Time on target. Less than 10 seconds before he's inside a fortified safehouse." The men leaned in, eyes narrowing at the details. Sector 19 wasn't just dangerous, it was suicidal. Narrow streets, overlapping angles, and insurgents crawling through every alley. The target wasn't going to stand still in an open window. He was going to move fast, shielded by bodyguards and cover. And the kicker? He'd only appear for a fraction of a minute before vanishing into a building so fortified it would take an airstrike to breach. The team's most experienced sniper, Sergeant Clay Harlow, scratched his jaw and let out a low whistle. 2 miles out, he muttered, scanning the terrain overlays. "Angles crap. Crosswinds in that corridor will be murder." And that wall, he tapped the image of a jagged concrete barrier, cuts our line of sight down to 5 seconds at best. 5 seconds? Corporal Trent scoffed. "That's if you're already locked on him. You'd have to be a damn magician to make that shot." The commander didn't smile. "This is a presidential-level directive. This target doesn't make it to that safe house." For a moment, the tent was filled with the quiet rustle of papers, the hum of the generator outside. The air was heavy with unspoken thoughts. Every man in that room had seen bad missions before. Impossible angles, bad intel, shots that most snipers wouldn't even attempt. But this was in another league. Finally, Harlow broke the silence. "With respect, sir, it can't be done. Not with the window we've got. And if we miss, we blow the whole op. Every gun in that district will be pointed our way before we can exfil." The commander's eyes shifted, hard and unreadable. "That's why we're not sending just you." Before anyone could ask what he meant, the tent flap opened. A gust of cold air slipped in, and with it came a figure none of them recognized. She was tall, lean, wearing desert fatigues without a unit patch. No insignia, no name tape. Just a dark baseball cap pulled low and a plain rifle case in her hand. She didn't speak, didn't salute. Her eyes swept over the table once, taking in the maps, the wind charts, the photos, and then she stepped closer, setting her rifle case down with a quiet thunk. The room shifted subtly. 6 pairs of eyes studied her, curiosity sharpening into skepticism. She was maybe early 30s, calm, composed, but she didn't carry herself like a fresh recruit. There was something in the way she moved, something in the stillness of her posture, that made it clear she didn't waste motion. The commander cleared his throat. "Gentlemen, this is..." He hesitated. "She's here to assist with the shot." "Assist?" Trent raised an eyebrow. "Sir, unless she's carrying a guided missile in that case, I don't see how..." "Enough," the commander said, shutting him down. "She's here because she's the best." The words hung there, absurd in their simplicity. The best? No one had ever heard of her. In a community as tight as the Sniper Corps, reputations traveled fast. You knew who was good, who was great, and who was legendary. This woman wasn't on any of those lists. Harlow crossed his arms. "No offense, ma'am, but this shot's beyond human limits." She didn't even look at him. Instead, she reached down and unlatched her case. Inside, the men expected to see an M2010, maybe a Barrett if she was going heavy. What they saw instead was different. Sleek, black, almost too refined to be military issue. Every part was custom machined, the finish flawless. It didn't look like a weapon built for the battlefield. It looked like something built for one purpose, a single perfect shot. She began assembling it without a word. Each movement was deliberate, precise. Barrel aligned, scope mounted, bipod extended. There was no fumbling, no wasted seconds. The weapon seemed to come alive under her hands. Corporal Trent leaned toward Harlow, voice low. "She's not even looking at the map anymore." "She already looked," Harlow said quietly. "Probably memorized it." When she was finished, she set the rifle on the table, its long, matte black barrel seeming to swallow the tense light. Then she reached into her pocket, pulled out a small, weather-beaten notebook, and flipped to a page covered in numbers, wind calculations, distance tables, environmental corrections, all scrawled in quick, confident strokes. Finally, she looked up. Not at the commander, not at the maps, but at Harlow. "What's the drop on your .338 Labua at 2,000 meters in 20-knot crosswind?" she asked. The question was so sudden, so precise, that Harlow blinked before answering. "About 8 meters, give or take." Her lips twitched. Not quite a smile. "Too much. You'll be off by a full torso." "He lives." The room went still. She closed the notebook and began breaking the rifle back down, as if her part in the conversation was over. The commander spoke up again. "She be taking the shot. You'll cover." It was said so simply, as if the matter was settled. The men exchanged glances, doubt, irritation, curiosity, but no one said what they were all thinking. Who the hell is she, and why does command think she can do what we can't? Outside, the wind rattled the tent walls again, carrying the smell of dust and oil. Somewhere out in Sector 19, the target was moving, and time was running out. Tomorrow, the mission would begin. And whether they liked it or not, she was their only chance. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the base in a muted amber glow. The sniper team had gathered in the armory tent, each man methodically prepping his gear for the next day's mission. The rhythmic sounds of metal clicking, bolts sliding, and scopes being wiped clean filled the air. The only person who didn't seem to belong was her. She sat alone at a narrow workbench near the back, her rifle case propped open. No name tag, no unit patch, no visible rank. Her desert fatigues looked standard issue, but without insignia, she might as well have been invisible to the system. Corporal Trent, never one to keep quiet, glanced over from where he was polishing the bolt of his M2010. "You know," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Most folks at least introduce themselves before a mission. Kind of a thing." "We do." No response. She was busy fitting the barrel of her weapon into the receiver, her hands moving with the kind of smooth precision that comes from endless repetition. She didn't even look up. Trent smirked, glancing at Sergeant Harlow. "What's the call?" "Here? She mute? Or just too good for conversation?" Harlow shot him a look. "Knock it off." But even he couldn't hide his curiosity. Finally, Harlow decided to try himself. "Where'd you serve before this?" She didn't pause her work. "Here and there." "That's vague," Harlow said, leaning back in his chair. "Army? Marines? Agency?" Her only reply was the faint click of the barrel locking into place. Staff Sergeant Reeves, the team spotter, gave a short laugh. "I'm starting to think she's CIA. They love the whole mysterious stranger act." She glanced at Reeves just long enough to let him know she'd heard him, and then went back to adjusting her scope. The rifle was unlike anything the others had seen before. Its design was sleek, almost elegant, with contours that suggested custom fabrication. The barrel was long, but not unwieldy, the suppressor so perfectly integrated It was hard to tell where the barrel ended and the silencer began. The matte black finish had no markings, no serial number visible. She assembled it without the hesitations most shooters had when piecing together their kit. No testing fit, no double-checking alignment. Every part slid into place as if the weapon knew where it belonged. When she mounted the scope, she didn't just set it and tighten the rings. She adjusted the eye relief down to the millimeter, then made fine-tuned windage and elevation clicks that seemed far too specific for a weapon that wasn't even positioned yet. Trent couldn't help himself. Where's your spotter? Or you just gonna trust those magic hands of yours? She finally spoke again, soft, calm, but with an edge that carried across the tent. Don't need a spotter. That shut him up. Harlow leaned forward, elbows on his knees. No offense, but nobody runs a shot like this alone. Not with the distance and the wind we're dealing with. Her hands kept working, her eyes never leaving the scope as she made another fine adjustment. Distance and wind aren't the problem. Inconsistency is. A spotter adds another voice, another reaction time, another error margin. I remove the variables. Her tone wasn't boastful, just matter of fact, like she was explaining how to sharpen a knife. Reeves whistled low. You're telling me you're gonna read wind, watch mirage, track the target, and break the shot all solo? She gave the faintest nod. For a moment, the tent was quiet except for the faint hum of the overhead lights. Even the men who didn't believe her had to admit, she sounded like she'd done it before. Harlow, still studying her, noticed something odd. She wasn't using any of the issued equipment for tomorrow's op. No standard issue ammo, no standard bipod, not even the issued sling. Everything, from the polished rounds lined up beside her to the rangefinder she'd placed on the bench, was her own. That wasn't normal. Contractors sometimes used their own kit, but even they had to justify it. Where'd you get that rifle? Harlow asked finally. Made it, she replied simply. The statement caught everyone off guard. You made it? Reeves echoed. She gave a small shrug, as if it were nothing worth noting. Built it over years. Adjusted for every flaw I've ever found in other rifles. Weight balance, recoil impulse, thermal shift, harmonics. All corrected. Harlow exchanged a look with Reeves. It wasn't that what she was saying was impossible. There were gunsmiths in the military community, but building a weapon like this required more than skill. It required obsession. Trent snorted, trying to break the tension. What? You? Also whipped up those rounds in your kitchen? Yes, she said without looking at him. That shut him up again. The men went back to their own weapons, but every now and then, eyes drifted toward her, watching, studying, trying to figure out who she was and why she was here. When she finished her rifle assembly, she didn't immediately pack it away. Instead, she placed it on the table in front of her, opened her small weather-beaten notebook, and began running calculations. The pages were filled with tiny handwritten numbers, diagrams, and shorthand notations. Harlow recognized some of it. Wind corrections, range conversions, but much of it was beyond the standard sniper formulas. Curvature adjustments for extreme distance, thermal effects on metal expansion. Even something he'd never seen before. A set of equations that seemed to factor in humidity's effect on subsonic rounds. She flipped to a clean page, ran her finger across tomorrow's mission map, and started writing again. The pen scratched steadily, never hesitating. Finally, Harlow couldn't take it anymore. What's all that? She glanced up at him, her eyes sharp but unreadable. Guarantee. Guarantee of what? That tomorrow, she said, closing the notebook. You see something you've never seen before. Then she stood, placed the rifle back into its case, and left the tent without another word. The remaining men sat in silence for a few moments. Reeves broke it first. She's either insane, or she's exactly what command says she is. Harlow didn't answer. He was still thinking about her hands. How they'd never once trembled. How her eyes had never darted from one thing to another. No, she wasn't like any shooter he'd met before. And tomorrow, he'd find out whether that was a blessing or a disaster waiting to happen. The pre-dawn air was sharp and dry, biting against the skin. The city sprawled ahead of them like a sleeping beast, its maze of streets and rooftops cloaked in a dusty haze. From their insertion point on the outskirts, the sniper team moved like shadows, silent, methodical, every man knowing exactly where to be. The plan was simple in theory. 4 shooters on rooftops, forming a kill box, overlapping angles, all trained on the gap between the wall and the building where the target would appear. Every second of exposure mattered, and every vantage point had been calculated to the inch. Every vantage point except hers. She broke from the group before they reached the first ladder to the rooftops. No explanation, no signal. She just peeled off, moving down a narrow side street, her rifle case slung casually in one hand. Through the team's encrypted comms, Harlow's voice crackled. You're going the wrong way." No response. He tried again. "Your assigned position's Sector B, rooftop 14. Good elevation, 1.9 clicks to target. You won't have a clean line from down there." Still nothing but the sound of her boots on uneven pavement. Trent chimed in, voice laced with irritation. "Guess she's too special to follow the plan." Harlow bit back his own frustration. This wasn't just breaking protocol, it was dangerous. A single misplaced shooter could compromise the entire operation. They watched her through binoculars from their respective climbs. She ducked into a partially collapsed building 3 blocks away from the planned firing line. The walls were cracked, the windows shattered, the roof mostly gone. Harlow radioed again, sharper this time. "That position's garbage. Bad angle, 0 elevation advantage, and your sightlines obstructed. You'll be shooting through?" He stopped mid-sentence, realizing she had already vanished inside. From the second floor, she found what she'd been looking for. A window frame with a jagged gap in the wall. Most would have dismissed it instantly. The angle was indeed terrible, the field of view narrow, and there was a tangle of rusted rebar partially blocking the lower right edge. But she wasn't looking at the obstacles. She was looking at the air. The gap between the 2 buildings where the target would appear was just visible from this window. More importantly, she could see a faint shimmer of heat rising from a generator. Exhaust in the distance. The shimmer wasn't random. It was steady, predictable. And with the right calculations, it could be used to mask her shot entirely. She unlatched her rifle case, assembling the weapon with the same precision the men had seen the night before. Every piece clicked into place with quiet certainty. Once the rifle was mounted on its bipod, she didn't look through the scope right away. Instead, she pulled out her small notebook and began adjusting numbers. From his own rooftop perch, Harlow watched her through a spotting scope. "She's not even on the rifle yet," he muttered. Reeves, lying prone beside him, kept scanning the streets. Maybe she's waiting for the wind to shift. Maybe she's insane. Trent's voice cut in from another rooftop. Her voice came through the comms for the first time that morning. Calm, even. Wind's not shifting. I'm locking in. Then silence again. She lay prone behind the rifle, cheek resting lightly against the stock. Through her scope, she measured the target's path, a fraction of an alley, framed perfectly, between the wall's edge and the safe house corner. In that fleeting moment of visibility, she would have exactly 2.7 seconds to fire before the window closed. And she wasn't aiming for the head or chest like a typical sniper. Her crosshairs were locked on a point that seemed almost absurd. The exact spot where the target's forward step would intersect with the bullet's path, factoring in the delay caused by subsonic velocity. Across the rooftops, the rest of the team shifted impatiently. 2 clicks and she's firing. Subsonic? Reeves whispered. That's suicide. Harlow didn't answer. His eyes were on her, trying to decode her thinking. On her side, every adjustment was deliberate, scope reticle alignment, bipod micro tilt, even the way she adjusted the sling tension to pull the rifle slightly into her shoulder. She wasn't just setting up to shoot. She was setting up for 1 shot, 1 outcome, and no room for error. When the final adjustments were made, she exhaled slowly, letting her body settle into complete stillness. Her breathing became shallow, her heartbeat steady. Harlow could see it now. That focus, that razor-sharp concentration. It wasn't arrogance, it wasn't recklessness. It was absolute control. The team leader's voice came over comms. All stations, confirm ready. One by one, the replies came in. Sector A ready. Sector B ready. Sector C ready. Then her voice, quiet but clear. Sector D? Ready? The leader gave the order. Stand by for target. Time on mark, 90 seconds. From the rooftops, the city seemed unnervingly calm. A lone street vendor pushed a cart down a side road. A stray dog padded through the dust. Somewhere in the distance, a muezzin's call to prayer echoed faintly. Through her scope, she wasn't watching the street. She was watching the mirage, the subtle distortions in the air that told her everything she needed to know about wind. Drift, heat layers, and shot deflection. Every second she watched, her internal map of the shot became more complete. The target was close now. Harlow's pulse picked up. He'd made impossible shots before, but nothing like this. His angle gave him nearly 4 full seconds of exposure. Hers gave her less than 3. In the second-floor ruin, she adjusted her left hand under the stock, her right hand loose on the pistol grip, finger resting alongside the trigger guard. Not on it, not yet. The team leader's voice came through again. Target moving into position. Mark in 5-4. She exhaled once, deep and slow, then let the breath fall away until her lungs were half empty, the perfect point of stillness. 3, 2. Her fingers slid into position, the pad resting on the trigger. 1. Mark. Through her scope, the target stepped into view. The world seemed to slow, the 2.7 seconds stretching into something longer, something measurable. Her crosshairs drifted minutely with each micro beat of her pulse. But her mind was already ahead, the bullet's path calculated, the wind accounted. 4. The trigger brake timed with her heartbeat's lowest ebb. She didn't blink, and she didn't fire. Not yet. The city air was heavy, a blend of diesel exhaust, dust, and the faint smell of something cooking far away. The rooftops lay still, every shooter frozen in position. The only sounds were the soft creaks of rifles shifting slightly against bipods, and the faint hiss of wind against headset mics. Through her scope, the target's head and shoulders slid perfectly into the narrow space between the wall and the corner of the safe house. A black SUV idled just behind him, the glint of sunlight off its windshield sending a brief flash across the street. For the rest of the team, this was the moment they trained for. The instant the target was exposed enough to pull the trigger without hesitation. But she didn't fire. The team leader's voice cracked in her earpiece. Sector D, take. The shot. Nothing. Sector D, do you copy? Still nothing. Harlow's finger was already tightening on his own trigger, muscle memory kicking in. Screw this. And then it happened. The target flinched. A sudden, almost imperceptible twitch, the kind that came when the nervous system had been severed mid-command. His eyes widened for a fraction of a second, and his knees buckled. The rest of him followed, crumpling to the dusty ground in a strangely graceful collapse. The SUV driver panicked, throwing the vehicle into reverse. Bodyguards surged forward, scanning rooftops, shouting orders. But no one had heard the shot. No muzzle crack, no supersonic snap, no visible muzzle flash from any direction. "Target down," Reeves said, disbelief dripping from every word. "Repeat, target is down. No visible shooter." "Sector D, was that?" the team leader began, but stopped himself. Because everyone knew. The silence on the comms was deafening now. Even the background noise, the shuffle of gear, the distant hum of the city, seemed to fade into nothing. All that remained was the image burned into each of their minds. The target dropping without warning, like some invisible hand had plucked him from existence. On her end, she was already moving. No celebration, no comment, no acknowledgement of the impossible shot she'd just made. She slid her finger off the trigger, flicked the safety on, and began breaking down the rifle with mechanical efficiency. Through his scope, Harlow watched her work. The speed was deliberate, but not rushed, like she had rehearsed this exact sequence 1,000 times. Barrel off, suppressor detached, bolt removed. Every part went into its phone-line slot in the rifle case, each motion without wasted effort. The other shooters were still prone behind their rifles, scanning for a secondary target, but Harlow could hear it in their breathing over the comms. They weren't looking for another hostile. They were looking for answers. Reeves whispered. "How the hell?" Trent cut in. "That was. I didn't even—" He stopped, either unable or unwilling to finish the thought. From the street below, shouts echoed. The bodyguards had formed a perimeter around the fallen target, weapons sweeping rooftops in frantic arcs. One pointed toward Sector C, then Sector A, guessing blindly. None of them looked toward the collapsed ruin where she'd been. Harlow kept watching her through his spotter scope. She didn't spare a glance at the chaos she'd created, didn't track the panicked guards, didn't even look at the target she'd just eliminated. She simply closed the rifle case, locked it, and rose to her feet. The comms came alive again. The team leader's voice was clipped. "All sectors exfil, now." Harlow moved first, slinging his rifle and making for the rooftop hatch. Reeves followed. Over the net, Trent muttered something about ghosts, and no one corrected him. By the time Harlow reached ground level, weaving through narrow alleys toward the extraction point, she was already there. Standing in the shadow of a battered wall, case in hand, helmet still low over her eyes. He slowed his pace, scanning her for any sign of exertion. Nothing. No elevated breathing, no tension in her posture. She looked like someone waiting for a bus. "You gonna tell me what just happened back there?" Harlow asked when he finally reached her. She looked at him for the briefest moment, her gaze unreadable behind the faint reflection in her lenses. "The job got done. That's not what I asked." She didn't reply. The rest of the team trickled in one by one, casting quick, sidelong glances at her before focusing on their gear or the narrow street ahead. No one said it out loud, but the question hung between them. What kind of weapon makes a man fall without anyone hearing it? As they moved toward the waiting vehicle, Harlow noticed something else. She carried the rifle case lightly, like it weighed next to nothing. But he knew the components inside weren't standard-issue aluminum or steel. Whatever she'd built was different. Custom materials, precision machining, a balance so perfect it almost defied physics. The exfil truck's engine rumbled to life as they climbed in. Dust kicked up around the tires, the scent of hot metal and oil filling the cabin. No one spoke for the first few minutes of the ride. The city slid by outside, its sounds muffled by the armored walls. Harlow sat across from her, watching the way she rested her forearms on the rifle case, fingers drumming a slow, unconscious rhythm. Finally, Reeves broke the silence. "You know, I've seen some crazy stuff in my time. But that," he shook his head, "that wasn't just skill. That was," she cut him off without looking up, "preparation." Reeves frowned. "Preparation doesn't make a shot silent." She didn't answer. The team leader, sitting at the far end, finally spoke. "We'll debrief back at base." His tone made it clear that was the end of the conversation, for now. But as Harlow sat there, the hum of the engine in his ears, he knew there was no debrief in the world that would explain what he'd just seen. She had done the impossible. And she had done it in a way that broke every rule of what he thought he knew about long-range shooting. He told himself he'd get answers later. But deep down, he already knew. Whatever those answers were, they weren't going to be in any manual. For a long, suspended heartbeat, no one moved. The crosshairs in each man's scope trembled slightly with the pulse of his racing heart. Every sniper holding his breath for the perfect moment to fire. They'd all been tracking the same figure. The high-value target as he emerged from behind the weathered concrete wall in that narrow alley. He took one step into view, another. Then, without warning, his legs seemed to give out. His body crumpled forward, folding like a marionette with its strings cut. No explosion of red mist, no reverberating boom from a distant rifle. No telltale supersonic crack tearing through the air. Just silence. The team leader's voice broke over combs, sharp with confusion. "Hold fire. Targets down. But what the hell just happened? Did you take the shot?" One of the younger snipers asked, his voice almost whispering even through the encrypted headset. "Negative," another replied. "I didn't even have a clear line yet." A ripple of unease went through the team. They knew that sometimes, in the chaos of operations, another unit could have eyes on the same target. But there'd been no report of a secondary team. No sound of a drone strike. No hiss of a suppressed pistol at close range. And given their distance, 2 miles, the target falling without warning was beyond explanation. Eyes turned instinctively toward the woman. Her position, 3 blocks off, wasn't visible from where they lay prone. The team leader toggled his comm. "Shooter 2 status. Was that you?" Silence. He tried again. Voice clipped. "Shooter 2. Confirm status." A pause, just long enough to make every man strain to hear. Then her voice came through, calm, unhurried, as if they hadn't just witnessed something that bent the rules of their world. Target eliminated. Packing up. No explanation. No hint of satisfaction or arrogance. Just a simple statement, like a weather report. The team leader sat back on his haunches, momentarily forgetting the procedure drilled into him over years of operations. This wasn't how it worked. A kill of this magnitude was supposed to be followed by confirmations, coordinates, and wind. Calls for after-action reports. Instead, they had nothing. One of the men muttered under his breath, "That's not possible. Even if she had the angle, we'd hear something. Subsonic or not, there's always something." They all knew. This. Suppressed rifles were quieter, yes, but never truly silent. Over such a vast distance, the ballistic crack was unavoidable. Unless... But no one dared finish the thought. 10 minutes later, extraction orders came through. The snipers began their disciplined withdrawal. Bolts closed, brass collected, gear packed in practiced silence. Normally, this was when they'd swap quick comments over the op, even some good-natured ribbing about who got the kill. But today, there was only a tension in the air, thick enough to choke on. As they regrouped on the street-level rendezvous point, they saw her approaching. The rifle case was already closed and latched, slung casually over her shoulder, as if she'd been on a casual stroll. not executing a shot so clean and so mysterious it had rattled the best shooters in the unit. She didn't break stride as she passed them, didn't offer a word. Her expression was unreadable. No smirk, no cold glare, just a level calm that unnerved them more than any display of ego could have. When the team leader finally spoke, his voice was quiet but deliberate. "We need to know how you did it." She stopped just long enough to turn her head slightly, eyes narrowing the barest fraction. "You don't." Then she kept walking. Inside the extraction vehicle, the silence was worse. The men sat with their rifles laid across their knees, stealing glances at her in the dim red light. She sat opposite them, legs relaxed, hands folded over the case, staring at nothing in particular. The youngest sniper couldn't take it anymore. He leaned forward slightly. "Look, I'm not trying to pry, ma'am, but I've been on this team 3 years, and I've never seen a shot like that. Not at that distance. Not without." Her gaze cut to him, and the weight in her eyes made him stop mid-sentence. It wasn't hostility. It wasn't even irritation. It was something worse. The quiet certainty of someone who could answer, but chose not to. Back at base, the confusion only deepened. The intelligence officer, tasked with verifying the kill, replayed drone footage for the team. They all crowded around the screen, watching the target fall again and again. Frame by frame, they looked for the impact, the telltale jerk, the entry wound, the puff of debris or dust from a missed shot. There was almost nothing to see. One frame, the man was upright. The next, he was folding forward. If there was an entry point, it was invisible at this resolution. Could be a heart shot, one of the snipers guessed. Even then, the intel officer replied, there'd be something. Clothing tear. Microsecond of visible trauma. This is clean, too clean. The room fell into a thoughtful silence. Every man in that room had seen death up close. This wasn't it, not in the way they understood it. Later that night, the team leader found himself in the base's dimly lit motor pool, where she was seated on a metal crate, cleaning her rifle in silence. The case lay open beside her, revealing a rifle unlike any standard-issue sniper platform. He stepped closer, trying to identify the make. It was custom, every inch of it. The suppressor was long, almost the length of his forearm, with baffling vents and grooves he didn't recognize. The scope was a precision monster, its dials marked in a language he couldn't place. Even the stock was modified, shaped for a perfect fit to her shoulder and cheek weld. "I don't need the secrets," he said quietly. "Just tell me what to call it." She didn't look up. Her hands moved methodically, wiping down the barrel. "You won't find it in any armory." And that was all. By morning, she was gone. No trace left behind except a faint scent of gun oil and a ghost of curiosity that would gnaw at the team for years. The official report would list the kill as a confirmed long-range elimination. Shooter, classified. The after-action review would be marked for command eyes only. But among the men who'd been there that day, the story would grow in the retelling. Not in boastful exaggeration, but in whispered, unsettled truth. They had been there when the impossible happened. When a target fell without a sound, and no one could say exactly how. And the woman who did it left them with nothing but questions. The debriefing room at the forward operating base was small, hot, and smelled faintly of gun oil and dust. The walls were bare, except for a map of the sector and a single humming ceiling fan that didn't do much against the desert heat. The sniper team sat scattered around the table, restless and agitated, their nerves still buzzing from the mission. The target was down, mission accomplished. But the way it had happened, or rather how it hadn't happened, was gnawing at them. Captain Ellis leaned forward, forearms resting on the metal table. "All right," he began, his voice firm, but betraying a hint of curiosity. "We need to know exactly what the hell happened out there." His gaze locked on the woman sitting at the far end of the room. She was quiet, leaning back in her chair, her rifle case beside her like a loyal guard dog. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she removed her gloves with slow, deliberate motions, folding them neatly before setting them down. Her eyes scanned the room, meeting each of theirs in turn. There was no defiance in her stare, but there was no apology either. Only the calm confidence of someone who knew. "Do you really want to know?" she asked finally, her voice low but steady. Ellis gave a sharp nod. "We do. My men deserve to understand what they just saw, or didn't hear." She took a slow breath, as if weighing how much to reveal. "You didn't hear the shot because there was no supersonic crack. My rounds are subsonic, custom hand-loaded. Lower velocity means no sonic boom. Pair that with an advanced suppressor system, and you get nothing. Silence." One of the younger snipers, Ramirez, frowned. "But subsonic rounds at that distance? That's impossible. They dropped like a stone before they got anywhere." Near the target, her lips curved into the faintest smile. "For most people, yes. But I've spent years studying ballistics, not just shooting, but building ammunition, crafting powder charges grain by grain, shaping bullet profiles to cut through the air as efficiently as possible. My rounds aren't like anything in your supply crates. They're mine." The room went still. Even the ceiling fan seemed to hum quieter. She leaned forward now, resting her forearms on the table, mirroring Ellis's posture. "When you take a subsonic shot at extreme range, everything is working against you. Gravity, wind, humidity, even the curvature of the earth. You can't just adjust your scope and hope for the best. You have to predict the environment as if it were a living thing." Kowalski, the team's veteran spotter, raised an eyebrow. "And you're saying you predicted all that in your head?" "No," she said simply. "I felt it." Her words weren't boastful, more matter of fact, as if she were describing how to breathe. "I'd been studying the wind patterns in that sector for 2 days. The direction shifts every 23 minutes like clockwork. There's a microthermal updraft coming off the east wall of the courtyard where your target stepped out. And the temperature differential between shaded concrete and sunlit sand? That affects air density more than most snipers realize. I accounted for all of it before you even took your positions." Ramirez sat back, shaking his head. "You're talking about layers of calculations that would take a computer half an hour." "That's why I don't rely on a computer," she replied. "By the time you feed the data in, the wind's already changed. You have to live it, not measure it." Ellis crossed his arms, still studying her. "And the rifle? That's not standard issue." Her eyes flicked to the sleek, matte black weapon case beside her. "No, it's built around a custom action, hand-lapped barrel, titanium suppressor baffle stack. Every inch of it is tuned for stealth, not speed. No muzzle flash, no heat signature worth picking up on infrared. The bipod legs are carbon fiber to keep vibration down. The stock's weighted for balance, so I can track micro-adjustments without muscle fatigue." Kowalski let out a low whistle. "So you're saying you hit a moving target 2 miles away, with a bullet that's basically coasting through the air, without a sound, and without a computer to guide you?" She nodded once. "Yes." The weight of the statement settled over the room like a blanket. The men exchanged looks, and for the first time since the mission ended, their skepticism was gone, replaced by something else. Respect, maybe even a touch of awe. But Ellis wasn't done. "Why?" he asked. "Why go to all that trouble? We've got .338 Lapua, .50 cal rifles that could have done the job with a fraction of the variables. You could have made the shot like the rest of us, loud, fast. No guesswork." Her gaze hardened, just slightly. Because sometimes, Captain, the world doesn't need to know a shot was fired. Noise draws attention. Attention brings retaliation. My way. The man falls, and no one knows why. His men will. Second-guess each other. They'll suspect betrayal. Fear will do the rest. Ellis leaned back, his expression unreadable. The logic was cold, almost clinical, but it made sense in the kind of wars that didn't make headlines. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint creak of the fan above. Then Kowalski broke the silence. You know, I've been doing this for 20 years. Thought I'd seen every trick in the book. Turns out, you're writing a new one. The faintest hint of amusement touched her eyes, but she didn't answer. She began re-gloving her hands, the conversation clearly over in her mind. Ellis sighed, rubbing his temples. All right, I'll put it in the report. Target neutralized. No compromise to our position. That's all that matters to command. She stood, lifting her rifle case with practiced ease. Good, she said. Simply, because the rest doesn't go in the report. And with that, she walked out, leaving the room full of battle-hardened men staring after her, each of them replaying the moment in their minds, wondering if they'd just witnessed skill or sorcery. What none of them realized was that her explanation, as detailed as it seemed, had only scratched the surface. The truth of what she could do and had done was buried deep in files they'd never be cleared to read. And somewhere, far from that desert base, another high-value target was already walking into her sights. The hum of the air conditioning was the only sound in the briefing room as the sniper team gathered around the table, their laptops open and glowing faintly in the dim light. The mission was over. The target was confirmed eliminated. Yet no one seemed interested in celebrating. They weren't here to talk about the op's success. They were here to talk about her. Staff Sergeant Cole, the team leader, leaned forward with his elbows on the table, eyes scanning his screen. He had run her name, the one she'd reluctantly given, Raven, through every database he had clearance for. Military personnel files, Special Forces rosters, even the CIA's secure portal, which was normally off-limits unless you had very high-level access. Nothing. No record of active duty, no training logs, no commendations. It was as if she didn't exist. She's not in here, Cole muttered, tapping his keyboard with irritation. Not even a ghost file. This is, he stopped, because he knew saying impossible would sound ridiculous after what they'd just seen. Private First Class Decker, the youngest sniper in the unit, leaned back in his chair. Maybe she's off the books. Like deep cover contractor level off the books. You ever read about those guys? Cole gave him a flat look. I've worked with contractors. They at least have project numbers and ops logs. Decker grinned faintly. Yeah, but maybe she's the kind you don't log. The kind who only shows up when the Pentagon wants something done without a trace. From the far corner, Sergeant Ramos, who had been silent up until now, spoke up. I've heard about her. Every head turned. Ramos' eyes stayed on his screen, though the glow from it lit the edges of his weathered face. Not her name. Not exactly, but stories. From guys who've done long-haul deployments in Afghanistan and Africa. There's talk about a woman sniper. No unit patch. No official gear. Never takes the same rifle twice. Supposedly, she's been hired for shots. Even Delta and DevJu turned down. Cole frowned. That's not how the U.S. military operates. Exactly, Ramos said quietly. Which is why, officially, she doesn't exist. Hours later, when the team dispersed, Cole stayed behind. He couldn't shake it. He had to know. He started digging deeper, bypassing normal channels, using encrypted tunnels meant for inter-agency queries. Finally, he found something. Not a file, not even a personnel note. Just a single declassified memo from more than a decade ago, stamped top secret in red, though most of the text had been blacked out. The fragment that remained read, "Operative redacted will continue in an unofficial capacity. Deployment to redacted and redacted authorized understanding executive. Directive 14-9. Missions will not be logged. Targets will be eliminated with discretion and plausible deniability. Operative will be provided with equipment at mission site. Number. Records of travel or action are to be maintained." Beneath the memo was a code name, Blackbird. Cole sat back in his chair. He'd heard of Blackbird, whispered among intel officers and old-school operators. Supposedly, Blackbird wasn't a sniper by trade, but rather an asset capable of adapting to any weapon system with surgical precision. An asset whose allegiance wasn't fully tied to any one branch, or even any one government. It explained the silence, the lack of comms chatter, the untraceable weapon. But it didn't explain why she had been sent to their mission, or why she'd chosen to walk away without a word. Meanwhile, the rest of the team couldn't let it go either. In the barracks, the talk spread fast, not just among the snipers, but through the whole unit. The shot itself became a kind of legend in the making. Soldiers swapped theories late at night over MREs and instant coffee. She had to have been using some kind of experimental round, one guy insisted. No, it was railgun tech. Classified. She's a test shooter, another argued. A few laughed, calling it just a lucky hit. But those who'd seen her work the scope, who'd seen the unshakable calm in her hands, they knew luck had nothing to do with it. 2 days later, Cole's secure phone lit up with a call from an unknown number. "You're digging, where you?" "Shouldn't, Captain?" a calm male voice said as soon as he answered. Cole's pulse spiked. "Who is this?" "You don't need to know. Just know this. You worked with one of our best. She's not yours to track. She was never here. Do your after-action report, take the commendation, and move on." Cole's jaw tightened. "I don't like having my team in the dark. She was in our op zone. That makes her my responsibility." The voice on the other end chuckled, but it wasn't friendly. "She doesn't belong to your chain of command. She doesn't belong to any chain of command. Consider yourself lucky she was there at all. That's all I'm authorized to say." The line went dead. That night, Cole didn't sleep. He kept replaying the op in his head, the quiet way she had set up, the complete absence of sound when she took the shot, the cold precision in her movements. And then, just as quickly as she appeared, she was gone. Some operators leave a mark through medals and citations. She left hers in the silence between heartbeats. Cole finally understood why the others had said it couldn't be done. They weren't wrong. Not for them, or for 99.9% of shooters on Earth. But for her, impossibility wasn't a barrier. It was just another target. Somewhere out there, he knew she was already moving on to the next impossible shot. And he would probably never see her again. But if he did, he'd make sure to ask her one thing, not how she did it, but why. The desert was cold before sunrise, the kind of bone-deep chill that seeps through fatigues, no matter how many layers you wear. The sniper team stood in silence outside the forward operating base, each man with his hands shoved deep into his pockets, breaths puffing in small clouds of white. They had all come to see her off, though no one had said they would. Her rifle case was slung casually over one shoulder, the matte black exterior catching just the faintest glint from the sodium lamps. She moved with the same quiet efficiency she had shown since the moment she arrived. No wasted motion. No need for anyone to point her toward the gate. She already knew where it was. The team leader, Captain Rains, was the first to break the silence. "You could at least stick around for the debrief," he said, his voice steady but low. It wasn't an order. It was almost a plea. She didn't slow her pace. "Not my kind of meeting," she replied, her tone devoid of arrogance, yet somehow final. Rains took a few steps to keep pace with her. "You realize no one's ever made a shot like that, right? I mean, we've all tried. We've all dreamed about it. And you?" He shook his head, almost laughing in disbelief. I just did my job," she cut in, eyes forward. Her voice was calm, but there was a weight to it, like she was speaking to herself as much as to him. Behind them, the rest of the team shuffled awkwardly. Some wanted to ask questions about her rifle, her past, the math she'd done in her head to land that impossible round. Others just wanted to say thank you, but none of them moved. They'd seen her dismantle the rifle piece by piece after the mission, each motion methodical, almost ritualistic. They'd seen the faint trace of powder on her gloves. They'd seen the body drop from over 2 miles away without hearing so much as a whisper of a shot. And they still couldn't decide if she was a legend or a ghost. She reached the gate and stopped. A convoy of 2 nondescript military trucks idled nearby, their engines rumbling low in the morning air. One of the drivers, a man the team didn't recognize, stepped out and opened the rear door for her without a word. Rains tried one last time. "At least tell me your name." She turned to face him. For the first time since arriving, there was the faintest hint of a smile at the corner of her lips. "Names don't matter," she said softly. "Only the shot does." And with that, she stepped into the truck, the door shut. A convoy rolled out, and within seconds, the vehicles were swallowed by the pale horizon, leaving nothing but tire tracks in the sand. The team stood there for a long moment after she was gone. Finally, Sergeant Miller muttered, "I don't care what anyone says. She's not on our books. You saw her file?" "What file?" Private Torres said. "Exactly," Miller replied. Back inside the base, Rains found himself staring at the operations log, flipping through pages and screens, searching for anything that might give him a clue. There was no mission number, no attached personnel file, not even a requisition order for her rifle. It was as if she had never been there at all. Hours later, an encrypted message arrived on the base's secure channel. It contained no sender information, no timestamp, just a single line of text: "Mission successful. Do not pursue identification." It was signed with a single letter, V. Rains leaned back in his chair, letting out a slow breath. Somewhere in the recesses of his memory, he recalled a rumor he'd once heard in a training course about an independent operative known only as Viper. Supposedly female, supposedly a ghost. Operated outside the chain of command, answering only to the highest level of Black Ops authority. The instructor had called her the shot you never hear, from the shooter you never see. But Rains had seen her, and he knew every man on his team would carry that image for the rest of their careers. Her silhouette framed in the dusty light of a second-story window, her rifle steady, her eyes unblinking, calculating wind and distance with the kind of cold precision that didn't belong to mortals. No medals, no headlines, no official record. Just the impossible, made real.